Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of day to everyone. Welcome to the largest and I guess fastest growing. It's my it's my punchline. Large scale Scrum meetup. This one is of New York City. Has gone viral and global over the last year or so. Um, today, in today's session, which I would consider like a more of a working session, it's really not a presentation. We will be discussing product definition and product uh, centricity and product um, related topics. And not by accident, I have my well-respected colleague and friend Ellen Gottesdiener also participating. She's the uh, co-creator of the product canvas, which is a very useful agile tool. I have a bunch of tools in my toolbox, not digital tools, and this is one of them. So I won't be really good. I kindly ask to mute everyone. All right, so Karen, I think that's you. Could you please mute yourself? All right. So in any case, please keep your mute, folks, unless you want to ask questions later. So anyway, in any case, today's conversation would be sort of a combination. We both will be passing the baton over to each other. I'll kick off by giving a few tips, giving a few guidelines, specifically with regards to less adoption initial steps and what's super critical in large scale Scrum at the very beginning, from the very beginning. And since product definition is one of the, and by the way, let me share my screen as we speak. Since product definition is one of the key things at the very initial step, this is why, and therefore Ellen's input would be very instrumental. Okay. So without any further ado, I am sharing my screen. Could you please confirm that you see it? Thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So, Jared, that's you. Could you please mute yourself? Folks, anyone who is on camera, could you please mute yourself? Mute. Couple of steps, very important at the very beginning of less adoption. It's number one is educating everyone to the extent that everyone understands what less adoption really entails. Especially this includes senior management, executive management, because organizational design decisions that need to be taken care of from the very beginning are pretty critical. And just supporting blessing with a sign off on the sponsorship bill won't cut it. You need what's called people need to go Gemba and actually go where action is. Senior management needs to make those informed decisions. For that, they need to be properly educated. Not only senior management, of course, senior management and people in the trenches. So one of the key principles of less adoption is bottom up and top down simultaneously. So that's critical. The second bullet down, as you can see, define a product. And I'm actually going to couple it with the third one, defining done. And as we will hear, today, defining done and defining what's called undone, not to be confused with unfinished, is pretty critical. And this is the part where I'm going to be leveraging and asking Alan to contribute quite a bit, especially number 2 and number 3. And then I would like to also us to take a closer look at what some additional downstream subsequent steps are during the especially initial phase of less adoption, specifically with regards to team blueprint creation, team self-organization. I'm stressing the prefix self, as well as overall less product group, defining the overall less product group. So without any further ado, I will, so I would like to, and this is some of the artifacts we're going to be using. There will be almost no decks today, practically no slides. There is something I'm going to share with you. I'm kind of paraphrasing this, this fine print. You can read at your own pace. There is a bunch of stuff we do during the preparation phase of less adoption. And in my experience, it takes an average no less than 2 months, give or take. There is also an adoption phase, and Potentially, if your product is very large, you may expand over years, over months and years to less huge, the larger version of less adoption. So this is going to be yours to use. Just a link. I'll make it available. You can read it at your own pace. Some visuals in this as well. There was another artifact I'll be using to pace myself um, through the discussion, but I'm going to stop now here because the first thing that comes up, the first, very important thing that I would spend quite a bit of time with teams and organization is the product definition. So Ellen, if you allow me, I'm going to pass the baton over to you. Um, I have your own links and your own slides here, but I think you have a better way to talk about this. You have like an animated way to do it. So I'm going to pass it on to you and say to everyone else, this is this aspect of product definition is pretty crucial. I'll tell you later how I've used it just recently, a few weeks ago in last class with the group of people that came from the same company. But this is a great coaching and especially if you're in product coaching tool to handle product definition. I'm going to pause. I think I'm just on time like I planned. So can I pass this on to you, Alan? And can you talk
Yeah, sure.
what
If you stop sharing, then I'll be able to go to my iPad as well.
Yep.
And there we go. So, well, first of all, hi everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. This topic of what is your product is quite provocative, and the thing is that it's incredibly important. And as Gene said, certainly to prepare for adoption of LeSS, it's absolutely critical. But if you think about what that question, what is your product? And you get different answers, which you probably will, even if your product is sold commercially or internally, people have a different concept of that. Just to think about the impact of that. I mean, what people assume or think the product is, it has an impact on what your backlogs are, how wide or deep they are. It has an impact on how the organization, well, let's think from a product thinking point of view, you think about strategy. So who are the customers? What is the market that we're looking at? Who is the competition? Your definition of the product depends on that. And even if your product is used internally, you still want to have that mindset of a commercial product where you think about the competition, where you think about the market, where you think about technology changes that can help the product evolve. And the strategy for the product feeds the roadmap, which is the long-term vision for how you're going to achieve your product. The product definition certainly defines your teams and your organization and how many backlogs you have. And a common pattern, and I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen it, I'm sure, Gene, you actually have seen this. I've seen this in a lot of organizations I've worked with, is a proliferation of product owner people that have their own backlogs and teams, and you have so much complexity, and a huge problem is a large amount of dependencies. That's usually a real sign that we have not defined the product broadly enough, more holistically enough. And your definition of the product also defines who are the best people to be the product persons, product owner, product manager, and who and how decisions get made. So it's pretty profound when you really think about it. So what I'm going to do now is first I want to start with, I'm going to do a quick share. I only have the canvas really with one slide in front of it that I want to share, which is a definition that I like to use of what a product is. So I'm doing a little switcheroonie so that the Zoom will recognize my, there we go. So now Zoom is recognizing my iPad. And the first thing I wanted to show is just a definition of product that I like to use. That a product is an application, system, device, service. And I think this is really, really key, because this is the case for most of us that live in a large, and our space has got really large product or combination that provides, of course, the V word, the value word, and to customers and business partners. So you don't want to go out of business because you're building and deploying a product that the customers love, but you can't sustain. So there's a balancing act, when you think about that definition. It's obviously needs to be very customer focused, but it needs to also serve your business and other business partners that you have. So just the huge point right here is that what I see a lot of is that people think that an application, an app, a single app is a product. And actually, oftentimes in a large enterprise, an application is one part of a broader ecosystem. And from the customer's point of view, they don't care that your product is comprised of 10, 12, 7 apps. They just want to get, their account information. They just want that claim paid and so forth. So to them, that little app is not the product. So when we think more broadly about the combination there, that's super critical, the service, right? So for example, a couple of years ago, I was working for a very large financial services organization, and we were doing product definition workshops, product thinking workshops. And this team was overseeing all the databases across this over 300,000 person global enterprise, and all kinds of databases. And one of the things that I had the person who was essentially like one of the product managers and lead engineer, head of engineering, do together was pair interviews of their customers. Now, in this case, their customers are internal people like app dev, application developers. Do a pair interview, gave them a protocol for that, and then had them come into the workshop with some information that we filled in with a wonderful tool called the Value Proposition Canvas. Some of you may have heard of that. Value Prop Canvas on the right side talks about pains, gains, and jobs to be done for your customers. So they did some of these interviews and came in with this. And one of the things that came out was the application development folks had tools that they could order different, a cloud database or SQL Server or whatever. And even within the cloud space, they could order many different types. There were many options, many variations of a cloud database for these monster apps that they were building and deploying. But one of the problems for them was they didn't know really the differences between them. And so what came out was that one of their pains was that they were having trouble making a decision. They didn't have enough information being fed to them. And where they did get good help, where they could call and have a conversation with somebody to get expert support, that service really needed to be part of the product. That was a small but important bulb moment. Sometimes the product is not just about the systems and the apps, but the service that surrounds it, that more whole product thinking is really important. So let me talk a little bit now, obviously, for a few minutes about the canvas. So the canvas has two parts, and the inspiration from this canvas comes from multiple sources. First of all, credit where credit is due. The business model generation canvas, which exploded the world of canvases, was really the first starting point. And there's a lean canvas that some of you might be aware of. That was also one of the key inspirations. And where I started first working with this idea of a canvas, I was doing product coaching at Zipcar, which obviously that's a very complex product. And we started using the canvas. So from there, this was, I don't know, this was five-ish, 6 years ago, maybe. So it's evolved over time. And what it's evolved into is this part one, which is more sort of strategic in nature and higher level. And then part two in the canvas, whoops, let me get past this. This was not where I was supposed to be. The part two of the canvas is right here. It jumped a slide on me. Actually, I somehow deleted part 2 of the canvas when I moved this over a couple of minutes before we got together. Jean, can you share part 2? Let me stop sharing for a second and I can get that ported over. But part 2 shows the 7 product dimensions. I deleted some of my own slides, so.
Let me share. I'm multitasking here.
Okay.
Part 2, meaning page. This is the one. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sharing it. 1 second. Page 1.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it.
There you go. Right, exactly. So part 2 of the canvas really articulates the core requirements that make up your product using the 7 product dimensions. And I'll talk a little bit about these dimensions, but just so you know, as a reference point, the book Discover to Deliver, which there's a website by that same name, discovertodeliver.com. If you go to that website, you can literally download a PDF copy of the book. Mary Gorman and I co-wrote that book and we made it available to the world. We stopped doing printing after 3 runs, and you can just download a PDF of the book. And you'll read a lot about the 7 product dimensions and how to work with that in that book. So let me go back to Canvas part 1. If you want to share that, Jean, for now, while I try to port it over
Yep.
to my, yeah. So maybe the best thing to do is share with you some principles that I find useful. And actually, there's a webinar. Jean, we did this in the summer, I think, that we talked about. You have a recorded webinar,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it's called What is Your Product? And I want to mention these principles because they show up for sure in the canvas. The first most important thing is that you take an outside-in view of your product. So the simplest possible thing you could do to try to get a shared understanding of your product, which is the end game here, is ask your customers what your product is. Right? And of course, that means you understand who your customers are. So you may have to do some exploration there, but ask your customers what your product is. So you define the product from the outside in. So you see in the middle row, you have 3 different types of partners: business, product partner business, and then customer, and then technology. Just focused on the customer partner there. Sorry, I'm moving around on my own machine here. You're identifying who are those customers, who are the purple people that we need to give some love to. And then we look at right next to it in the block next to it is what they value. And here's where I like to start loosely with something called value considerations. So we think about right in the center, that's at the very heart of that first canvas, the customer and what they value. So that is something you would articulate in the canvas. Here's where I told you about interviewing customers and using the value prop canvas to understand their pains, gains, and jobs to be done can be really a very helpful tool. Or creating a role map to understand your customers. But one of the things I find in this whole row around the partners is that I like to think of, I don't like the S word, stakeholders. I like to think about people that have something to do with the product as product partners. And they're the 3 constituents: the business, the tech customers you see in the middle, and the technology. So if you're doing, you're doing this collaboratively, which you need to be doing, and eliciting understanding who those partners, AKA stakeholders, are, I actually like to go after all 3 at once and then have special focus with the customer, because our minds think expansively. So expand and then contract. So we'll include customers naturally. So that's a really, really important point about the middle column, understanding your customers. Another thing that is pretty obvious on the top left is there's a vision for the product. And believe it or not, maybe you would believe it, many products don't have a clear vision. And there's many ways that you can elicit and articulate a vision. Some of you may be familiar with the product box. Some of you may use Jeffrey Moore's structure. I like to also think about the vision as a word that is visual. So drawing pictures, wake up the next day, and what's the world like? So there's many techniques, many people on this, on looking at the recording or on right now, probably are familiar with. But if you think broadly about the vision, you're going to see that it's solving a problem for some customer community. So it's a cross check against your understanding in that middle block of who the customers are. And then revenue streams, cost factors, channels, those are obviously things that we want to understand. A common question that I get is, if your product is used internally, you know, what do you put for revenue streams, or what do you put for channels? So revenue streams is how are you getting your budget, right? So you may not be getting it from an external a buyer that's external, but you do have a pseudo buyer internally from some kind of budget or some kind of budget allocation process. And then channels, that's often for internal products, often neglected. How do you let your customers and users know that your product exists? How do you promote changes to the product as it's evolving over time? How do you gain their awareness of a product? You really need to think, you meaning the virtual you, being a product person, and that includes thinking from the product development team's point of view. You want to think like a product manager. A product thinking involves letting your customers know that your product exists and help them using the customer, and always understanding their pains and their gains. So those are the channels. You know, it could be town halls, it could be internal webinars, it could be through their customer support and so forth. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. So the first principle that I always use, going back to the customer, is outside in. The next principle when you're defining your product to think about is the art of the long view. So you want to look at the product from potentially multi-year perspective. So blockwise on the canvas, on the very bottom section on the left, you have the competitive or leader landscape and the innovation waves. So were you to, whether you're commercial or not, what you want to do here is, this is basically where competitive analysis comes in. Who is the competition? What do they do really well? Who is the leader? What is their superior capability? That kind of thinking, I remember particularly back in Zipcar, when we focused on that block and started with the product manager exploring that, we found a gap that we wanted to fill. And the question, of course, is that a differentiator or not? That was one of the tough things that we had to deal with. Or do we just want to be on parity with that competitor? So these are the kind of product thinking that you want to have, that block helps you with. And of course, the innovation waves, what's coming down the pike that could change the product, whether it's technologies, platform standards. Now, this is one that's a little bit of a trap for some product people, because they might think that a common trap is that a new innovation is a new product. A new innovation is just the evolving, usually, of that product when you think of it over a long period of time. When you think of it over however many years you hope your product to live. Because remember, a product's going to go through, a healthy product's going to go through a life cycle, you know, where there's the curve, there's a classic curve from Kotler and Keller of marketing fame, where it dips in where your first introduction, then it goes through growth, and then maturity, which you hope that period is as high as possible in terms of profit, and then decline, right? So that's a general curve that your product's going to go through. And as it's going through that curve, and it's going through growth and maturity in particular, you're going to have innovation waves in that product. And you want to milk it at that maturity phase as long as possible. So first principle, outside in. Second principle, the art of the long view, which those bottom blocks help you with. The next is really, really important and a big trap, which is that you want to define the product as broadly as practical, which again will have the effect of breaking down all these dependencies and having a single backlog that might have many teams if you're a very large organization. So Jean, if you could flip over to part 2, some of the tools that in Canvas part 2 is really, really helpful is focusing on some of these dimensions. So let's take one under the interface dimension, which is how your product connects to its customers. And some of these 7 product dimensions have visual tools that you could use. One that I find really, really helpful, and I just was working with the team literally last week, and we were using this tool called the context diagram, which has been around since dirt. And where you have a picture of it, Jean, or are we going over there?
No, I'm still sharing it. Okay, is that what I'm sharing? Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you were going somewhere else.
No,
What
no.
I was going to do is what I can do is just to talk a little bit about the tool and how this helps you identify your. Sorry, 1 second. I put down my. There it is. I put my pencil away on my iPad, and sometimes I forget that I actually put it away. But the context diagram, which as I mentioned has been around for a while, is a good way to articulate the interface dimension at a very high level. So one of the things that I saw happening, and I'm going to share now for a second, if you let me. I'm going to show you a picture of what a context diagram might look like broadly, and then why that helps you understand. Hold on, give me a second. Let's get back to here. Screen mirroring. I don't know if anybody has used this tool, but I find it really helpful. The simplicity of it is very elegant. So this would be your product, okay, in the product X. And then you have external entities, and these could be people, devices, other systems, people, systems, and devices. And literally speaking, and I'm going to make it purple because I like to use purple. We use colors semantically with the dimensions. You have things going. These are the interfaces in and out, right? And what actually is typically being sent in and out is information or data or messages. If this happens to be, for example, a device, then that information is going to be usually a message. If this is a human or department, right, that they may be sending, say, a query, a claim query, let's say, as an example, and they're going to get back some answer, right? So one of the things I've done, this is as broad as possible, this principle, is pull people together from different products, what they think are different products, put them in teams and have them draw their context diagram. After we do it, usually good to do an example together. And one of the things that ends up inevitably happening, if they're, let's say, sister products, so to speak, is they'll look around the room and say, oh, you know, I also have, I have this one, and I have this one, and I have this one. Wait a minute, we all have the same external entities. And I have something around claim query, and I have something around whatever this is, you know, that label is. So maybe it's the same product. It becomes really obvious very quickly that they're most likely the same product. So that's a really simple way to first have them understand that their interfaces are the same. And by the way, these interfaces are also a good way to cross-check that most likely these are going to be users in the user slot of the second canvas, right? So and customers, right? So there's a couple of cross checks built right within. So this is just a little bit of conversation about the interface dimension. And this is one tool that you could use there. The broad as possible. So another thing that I've done is, if you look at go back to Gene and you show your screen and we take a look at Canvas Part 2 and think of the action dimension, which is in the green slot there. You can ask people to think about what are all the features or capabilities of the product. So if you think about like that database, the database, the team that was managing all databases, the cloud databases and otherwise, a lot of those capabilities are exactly the same. They might have slightly different feature names, but they're essentially the same. Well, we're probably thinking more broadly about the same product. So some other things, subtleties there that may come out in some questions, but just wanted to mention that. So outside in, long view, as broad as possible. The other concept, which now I'm not going to focus so much on part 1 or part 2, but is really, really important principle, is around structure or design. So some of you may know Craig Larman's rules of organizational behavior, which are totally brilliant. And one of them is that structure defines culture. And a takeoff of that I've discovered is that once you have defined your product as broadly as practical, and by the way, as practical means sometimes you can't go as broad as you want because there's another organization structure that you can't change, or there's a partner that you have that's outside of your control. So you try to make it as broad as practical. When you're doing this and you do define it as broadly as practical, that's how you organize your structure. You don't take the current org chart and then figure out what your products are. You understand what your product is as broadly as possible, and you organize your teams around that. And then you'd have your feature teams, basically, are going to be those chunks of features in that action dimension that are highly cohesive, loosely coupled features or capabilities that are delivering that capability, service, etc., to the customers. So structure is defined by the product, or said another way, product defines structure. Product should be used to define the structure of your organization. And of course, this whole thing needs to be done collaboratively, defining the product. That's totally essential. So pulling in the leaders, pulling in the technology and business people together to go through this product definition exercise. And there's a whole bunch of tools. I think, Gene, we talked about some of them when we did that other session, talked about workshops that I've done that help you define the product. So you can read more about that. You want to have a basic glossary of terms. What is a feature? What is a component? What is a product? As sort of a precondition. You want to have clarity around what criteria you use to define a product. And then you can use some of these activities to do this collaboratively. So the principles behind this, and the Canvas is one tool. There are others, but I like to use the Canvas as something that we're continually evolving. Is outside in, right? From a customer point of view, the art of the long view, thinking of your product, the long view, as broad as practical. That structure follows product, and do it collaboratively.
Thank you, Alan. So you're not dropping. You will stick around for another 20 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Thank you for the summary and for your insight. So just before I kind of dive into something that's almost very super relevant to what Alan has described, I'm going to use one point that you made as an anchor. Product definition should be as wide as possible, but within reasonable limits. And when we say reasonable limits, we effectively, so in large scale Scrum, we essentially refer to how wide can a product definition be in order for a single product owner, which is natural, right? Because only one product owner, one product. How sane would his or her life be to support this product as it goes through evolution? And of course, another element to this would be how wide a product could be so that we can support it by up to 8 teams working together side by side out of the same backlog for the same product owner. And this number 8 isn't really a religious number or miraculous number. It has been derived after many years of experimentation and kind of settling. Okay, 2 to 8 teams. That's what that's your LeSS product group size should be to be able to effectively develop a product. So now, that being said, let me also tell you, so another point that Ellen made, culture follows structure, and product definition could be and should be a good pacer, a good definitive factor to define our structure. So culture follows structure, but structure could and should be something that supports product development. One of the things I think someone pinged, who should be involved in product definition? Well, clearly, if we have a very complex, multi-layered organizational structure with project managers, program managers, portfolio managers, managers of managers, these are at least likely those people that you want to be involved. Maybe at certain senior executive level, you need to have a few people that will be involved in product definition to set strategy, mission, vision, and other critical things. But you need absolutely also involved individuals that will be essentially using your product. And this juncture, I probably will even say, let's go as far as not necessarily delineating between external customers or internal users, because that's essentially, we need to delineate this in LeSS. Let's just call these people consumers of your business value that you produce. You really need to talk to those people that will be using it, not people that sit in between, not people that treat everything as a fixed everything, fixed budget, fixed scope, fixed timeline, body of work that is usually a mimic of the organizational design that is also very traditional. What I can share with you folks also is that just a couple of weeks ago, and this isn't about what we do in LeSS training, but I was blessed, I was lucky to have a few people that came from the same organization. There were, I think, 3 or 4 people. They were representing both R&D, research and development, and technology. So we leveraged some of the Q&A and some of the practical time to look at their specific internal case. And we wanted to look at their own product definition. And the rest of the class was actually very interested in doing that because it was in practice. It was a fly-by, dry run. These would not be the only people involved. In fact, good product definition may take from a few weeks to a few months because you constantly go back. It's like playing an accordion, playing a harmonica. You expand and you contract until you come to something that is reasonably wide, but not overly wide, before you flip the switch to go to LeSS sprinting. So let me share also a pretty, pretty lean and pretty simple. It's not even a canvas. It's just a web page where I'm gonna walk you through and paraphrase it. We had, like I said, we had a few folks from the same organization, and we were able to do a few iterations of Ellen's canvas work. And guess what? This is right there, version 1. The first time around, we ended up with product definition that was so humongously big that even at that juncture, everyone was clear. No, this is not going to be. We're not going to be able to support it with LeSS adoption. We're not, let alone LeSS adoption. Let's forget about LeSS adoption for a minute. It would be so impractical to work in a controlled way. It will be just overly huge. So we need to do another iteration. So what they did another iteration of product definition. And you don't have to read these pink letters, although you may if you would like. We came up with the version 2.0 of the same. And it seemed like it was much more sane, much more concise. And this is something that people decided, okay, we think we can pull this off. Then we actually spent some time to go through product canvas number 2, page 2, and this is just one of the few artifacts that I kind of glued into this page. We attempted to do story mapping and value stream mapping, some of the techniques that would be very supportive of canvas work. And in the end, so we also did story mapping here. We actually ended up with a bunch of large backlog items that would later have to be decomposed. These would be your product-centric backlog items. You may call them epics, features, stories, whatever. The right term would be the authentic term would be a backlog item. And here's an interesting part. We also consider, so in large scale Scrum also, it's super important to identify to define your own definition of done. So again, this is just a coarse grained and very, it's not a final list of things that they wanted to put on the done side, but it was the way they would think about this going forward. We also had to define what's called undone. Undone work, there's really no such thing in Scrum or in LeSS. It's not an official term. It's the facetious way to describe any kind of work that your team or multiple teams in LeSS, in large scale Scrum, physically cannot finish when they finish their sprint. And this is usually because of organizational design limitations. So don't confuse unfinished and undone. Unfinished is when you plan to do, but you couldn't because maybe you overplanned and, overplanned and underestimated. Undone is when you clearly know that you're not going to be able to do. In your own organization, this could be called anything you want: DevOps, DevSecOps, integration team, coordination team, release train engineer, I cannot go production yet team that is going to take care of my dirty laundry team. Right? Anything that sits outside of your definition of done would be essential undone. So we wanted to.
Gene, if I can add to that, when you think of that topic of having the product defined as broadly as practical, one of the things that is often comes much later in a broader definition is, think about sales and marketing. When you really do think, let's say in a commercial product, as broadly as practical, that is part of the product definition. So some of the undone in your column on undone might be marketing collateral, for example, or user training, those kind of things, until the product over time is defined more appropriately broadly.
Yep, thank you. And that was actually the thinking behind, because I'm referring to this 300-400 man company that the folks from which company were in attendance. They are actually in product development business, and indeed sales and marketing would sit today outside of their definition of done, and naturally so, because they're salespeople and marketing folks. Well, at this point, they don't imagine them being drafted into a team structure. So at least you have to be honest with yourself by saying, okay, this is undone part. Once we deliver the end of the sprint, this is still a work to be complete, and there will be another called undone department that's going to handle it. So just to keep going on this one, and again, by the way, everything that we've done here, there in class, took us a couple of hours, would typically take a few weeks to a few months. And of course, participants would be different. People would be of different flavor, right? We also take a look at the technical skill set and functional domain expertise that would be required for each team, hypothetically, to get our product item, backlog item, a feature from to do to done, from soup to nuts. That was another aha moment for many, because as you may have seen in many organizations, very traditional component teams pretend to scrum or pretend to sprint, and what they deliver at the tail end is what's called an IOU. It's a component that needs to be stapled further with a bunch of other components before you actually deliver a feature. So this was it was a huge aha moment for many, because this is essentially, these are all the skills and domain expertise that you need to have in the same on the same team in order to be able to deliver any of the features from the same shared backlog in order to deliver value. to the customer. And this was the last practical step we did in class, specifically by looking what a prototype of a team blueprint should be. And I'm very explicit on the word blueprint. Nowhere near should we be where we actually assign individuals, people to teams. This was just for the sake of having a conversation. What would a team look like if we wanted to build it? So this blueprint typically becomes an input into a self-design workshop in large-scale Scrum we're running prior to flipping the switch and going into sprinting. So it helps individuals, teams, your organizational structure, your department, your technology, to shape up each individual team as per your blueprint. Of course, individuals opt into teams, so it's not a part of this conversation, not a part of this dialogue, but just keep in mind, in large-scale Scrum, we strongly recommend teams to be self-forming based on some of these guidelines. And also, we kind of hypothesized, there's very little written on this one, what a whole product group blueprint would look like. And where we start, oh, and by the way, so of course, we looked at the org design. This is all sanitized, so you can look at a later point. But imagine there were some pretty senior people in attendance for this discussion. You need to have real senior folks from R&D. You need to have some senior folks from business. And of course, you need real doers, people that are going to be working on the product. You can't do it in a silo based on what project, program, and portfolio managers are telling you, because oftentimes we realize that's how we end up with fake portfolios and fake programs and fake projects, because we have fake products defined in the first place. That's why product definition is so critical. And we kind of left it at that, because actually team design is not to be done without actual team members, future team members. So it was very explicit to everyone. So that's really it. I mean, I want to leave a few minutes for questions and for clarifications. This is kind of a dry run and a very high-level flyby of what your initial steps of LeSS adoption should be when you not only define your product, which is super critical, you also define a definition of done, understand what your undone work would be, what your team blueprint would be. And of course, for that, you need to fully educate everyone. And you would be looking very closely, unquestionably, at your organizational design, because in order to support effective product development, you need to what's called descale your organization. That's one of the things we often get people confused. They think if they have a large product, they need to automatically scale things up and make things bigger. And that's not necessarily true. In order to scale goodness, such as Scrum by multiple teams, you need to descale the rest of the organization. So as you may know, I'm sure large-scale Scrum is a descaling framework. And product definition is a super critical part of LeSS adoption at the very beginning. And this is why here I'm going to enlarge it. Again, these three things, you can obviously read number 5 and number 6. Everything is critical, but these are the three things we kind of focus today on. And number 4 would be dovetailing off of number 3 and of number 2 and number 3. So I'm going to pause. We got 7 minutes remaining. It was kind of a high-paced discussion. Alan, you want to say something? Maybe you want to take some questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. But first, kudos to you for sharing that and having that online. That's awesome. Thank you, Gene.
Yep. Thank you. Folks, any questions? We see some pings. So maybe I should read. Linda Porter, can I see that last list? It will be all shared. So the very top link that I shared here, all of the links are there, as well as the recording. We shall place it there. Okay. Let's take a look what else we got here.
I have a question.
Please do.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Fantastic presentation, guys. So I've taken over a product portfolio, and it has a whole bunch of legacy when I say legacy, I don't mean the technology, but just let's call it cultural and product artifacts in terms of how everybody worked. And we bought founder companies and all kinds of stuff. How have you found this exercise to try to just get people to embrace just a standard view, right? I mean, just bringing them to the party, so to speak. Forget about almost what we would canvas up, just acceptance that a canvassing is an acceptable approach. I know this might sound so elementary or ridiculous, but I found that is a incredibly difficult process, and it's because people are so wedded to what they built, right? If they built something, an IoT industrial product for 8 years or 5 years or whatever, they can't see outside of that vantage point. Have you found that you just bypass them and go to the executive sponsors and then have them sort of, push down? Or because I'm sort of trying everything to be blunt. I don't know if the question was clear or not, but
It sounds like you're saying that it's difficult for some people are holding on to a narrower definition of product. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
yeah, and because these products have real customers, and they've gone so native with their customers and with their features and with the jump left, jump right, jump up, jump down kind of demands that don't necessarily align to flow of value or whatever. They just define to making somebody happy, whatever that meant, satisfied, whatever. And it's trying to pull all this into a much more traditional, standardized stage gate product development portfolio, let's say. Maybe using modern tools, obviously, but that type of more plane, like a plane, like a geometric plane, so that we can then drive value streams, right? So then basically this is about value streams to our customers versus about we have a product, which might have all this overlap or, just might not be competitive, whatever. But just pulling these people to a space psychologically where they're comfortable having that conversation. Have you found there's tools or approaches or that you've used for that, or the way you've had conversations? Does that make any sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, it is threatening. It's actually threatening to some people. And I'm actually thinking of somebody in particular in one of our early workshops. I was working with this large organization who literally was sitting there like this. And I have to tell you that it was many workshops and many interactions, and a little bit less than, but essentially a year later, he got it and was less threatened by it and understood that actually it was the right thing to do and the right thing to do on many levels. So my opinion is bring these people along for the ride the whole time, right?
Okay, great.
And it is a mistake to isolate and put somebody in a corner. That it's a shared learning. You collaborate. That's why that last principle is at play. So I've used a variety of different tools. Again, some of those are mentioned in that video to do this collaboratively. So bring everybody along for the ride.
Okay, no, thank you so much.
If I may just add to this, so a part of the left that page. So that part number one, educate everyone, is pretty critical. So when we say educate everyone, we don't literally mean everyone under the sun, but at least we need to make sure we embrace and educate everyone who will be potentially directly or indirectly, marginally involved in product development. Specifically, large-scale Scrum is lean and agile product development. It's not project management tool. It's not a methodology. It's not an operating model. It's an organizational design framework. And therefore, bringing those senior folks on business and on R&D side is super critical. And leaving behind such organizational dimensions as HR and budgeting and finance and location strategies would be also a mistake, because you have to have them fully embraced. Not at 250,000 man operation, because that would be a very broad and shallow, superficial, artificial attempt to create an illusion of improvement, but deep and narrow in a very product-centric, very customer-centric way along the lines of value flow and customer centricity. And this is
So with that said, Gene, quick question. So given a choice, if you have a good sized portfolio that I do, with this longer education track, which makes complete sense, does it make more sense also to just pick one that either seems more ready or is easier or whatever, and then really kind of nail that one, like as the example over the next, whatever, 90, 180 days as the sort of, you all could do this too if you'd like.
So Aaron, I'll tell you one thing. I'm going to walk out a little bit and say this. It is 99.99% probability that what you define as a portfolio today is an artificial stapler of a bunch of ad hoc activities that are put together for convenience and quasi-visibility from a senior executive manager.
Absolutely.
Therefore,
totally right.
I would unpack this. I would almost abolish this thing and start from scratch and come from a very customer-centric angle. And the reason why this is a problematic for many organizations is because not only are you challenging work breakdown structure, which this is essentially, you're challenging organizational design and sphere of control.
Exactly.
These managers at every level have a turf to protect. And today, a portfolio or program management, what today is considered as a program is an artificial stapler of a bunch of activities, and you got a person in the role, and they cherish it near and dear to their heart. From a customer perspective, this most likely a meaningless container, but for them, of course, it floats the boat. So
you're shifting from project to product thinking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The challenge sometimes is though when you have already existing products in the marketplace and there's flow of revenue, and so there's a coalescing of this artificial container or containers around all those flows of revenue, and so figuring out how to, let's say, horizontalize the VSM, you know what I mean, across all of that, and that flow of revenue is still there, which of course everyone's going to protect to the last breath. That becomes this sort of Rubik's Cube, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, look, folks, this is again, the more we go, I think going into 2021, I have a gut feeling that these conversations become more and more in demand. 2020 was pretty tough for everyone. So let's not call it the end of the conversation, maybe the beginning. It's not the first one we had, but definitely not the last one. So we could be even diving into some of the practical examples of what we have done with various organizations and teams. So just stay tuned. For now, I think just out of respect to everyone's Sunday time, I want to start wrapping. All of the assets have been put on the page that I shared with you at the very top. Let me do this again.
What was the drawing tool? I missed that earlier.
I'm sorry, what was the what?
The drawing tool that was used.
That's
to draw.
I was just using my iPad. So
okay.
And I was using 54 on my
okay.
iPad.
I am pinging in the channel, in the Zoom channel once again, the link where we're going to post the video and any additional assets, and maybe I'll take more from Ellen if she has any. I'll post it here so you can all refer to it. Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you all for joining. I mean, the turnout was at one point over 50 people, so that's good for Sunday morning, at least from my end. Ellen, thank you very much for coming out.
And there is 2 blogs on the Product Canvas. Sorry, I probably should have put this in the chat, but you can go to the ebgconsulting.com, look up Product Canvas, and there's a blog on both parts with a lot of detailed information.
You can email me and I'll give a direct link to it. Just make, as long as I have it in the next hour or 2. So
I think you actually have it right there. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing, and I think it's about time to stop recording. Thank you all. Stay safe, be well, happy holidays, happy new year, and hopefully we can see each other again soon. Okay.
Thanks so much, Ellen and Gene.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gene, for putting this together. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen.
Our pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
You,
Yeah, thank you.